Can you please use that voice?
My Mickey Mouse voice. Sorry. Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome to Athens Happens. I'm Kuhn, senior digital producer at The New Political.
And I'm Izzy Keller, digital editor.
Athens Happens is a podcast brought to you by The New Political, a student publication dedicated to explaining the nuances of Ohio University, Athens, and state politics.
You can find new episodes on Monday at thenewpolitical.com or wherever else podcasts can be downloaded.
I just wanted to put a quick content warning out there before the episode starts. We're going to be talking about sexual violence and sexual harassment in this episode. If you are triggered or bothered by any of those things, consider clicking off. And I also wanted to say that alongside this episode, there's going to be infographics and information that you can look at because it is a complicated process and it can be hard to understand just from listening to us talk about it. This week, we're talking with news editor Maddie Harden about the sexual violence reporting process at Ohio University for an upcoming collaboration between The New Political and Ohio State's The Lantern. How are you doing, Maddie?
I'm doing lovely. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So, Izzy, you're kind of the expert on this topic, so I'll just kind of let you start it off.
Yep. I guess I would be. I wrote the article about it about a year ago for The New Political's, it was like a spring project, right?
Yeah.
So this is it was just talking about the Title IX process. It's actually called the sexual misconduct grievance process because it's not always relating to Title IX, because Title IX, changed a lot in the past couple of years. But basically, we're going to kind of take you through the process and, talk about it. But this is going to be a summary because this process is extremely complex, kind of complicated, and very long. So, do you want to get started with it?
Yeah. So, I guess first, Maddie, do you want to talk about the project between you or between TNP and the Lantern?
Yeah, I'd love to. So this project started off, I was reading a lot about the red zone, and I was thinking, we've been doing a lot of more collaborations recently with other publications. And, the one thing that's most prevalent on every single college campus, no matter where it's located, is sexual violence. So I reached out to a couple universities about, other university student pubs about a collaboration, and the Lantern got back to us, and we've been working for the past couple months. We sent out a survey. We've been doing a lot of research, putting together a lot of data. There's a lot of people involved in this, and it's super awesome to see all these people working together, and I'm really excited to see how it all comes together.
What are you most looking forward to when the project is finally released?
I'm excited to see the visual display of all the data that we've had, and also it being done. It's been such a long process. I mean, I've loved every step of it. But yeah, it's just grueling, and it's a hard topic to cover and to be constantly thinking about. But I think in my interviews and people I've talked to, it's given me a lot more hope about the whole situation. I've personally become more aware of a lot of the resources that are offered, and things that are my role as a bystander, and I'm excited to be able to share all these findings with Athens community, the Columbus community, and so on and so forth.
And I've just by talking to you and hearing about what you've been working on and working on the project as well, I know that you've learned a lot of you've interviewed a lot of people, and you've learned a lot of really interesting things. What is the most interesting or shocking thing that you've learned throughout the reporting process and while working on this project?
I think even beyond the reporting process is that it's so underutilized, and with that those required trainings that goes into prevention that every student has to take is one of the least effective means of educating people on prevention. I mean, it checks a box, but it's not enough. And along with that is the open-ended question from our survey. Like, opened my eyes a lot, because it's like, wow, like I'm not the only one who feels this way, or like, wow, like it's insane to see like some of like the outrage that students have about this, and there hasn't been much change over like the past decades. Like, it's the same trainings, it's the same processes. Yeah, it's interesting to see students like really speak up and speak out about things. Sexual violence means that someone forces or manipulates someone else into unwanted sexual activity without their consent. Reasons someone might not consent include fear, age, illness, disability, and or influence of drugs or alcohol. Anyone can experience sexual violence, including children, teens, adults, and elders. Those who sexually abuse can be acquaintances, family members, trusted individuals, or even strangers. And then sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct, according to Clark College, is a type of sexual misconduct is a type of violence that uses power, control, and or intimidation to harm others. It includes sexual harassment, sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. It occurs when there's an absence of consent, and consent is a free and clearly given yes, not the absence of a no, and it cannot be received when a person is incapacitated by alcohol or drugs.
When we are talking about the sexual harassment and other sexual misconduct grievance process, we are pretty much talking about two different policies. There's university policy, and that policy is 03.004, but for purposes, so I'm not just saying a whole bunch of numbers, I'm just going to say university policy. And Title IX. And Title IX is a federal piece of, is it legislation? Is that the right word? Mm-hmm. It's a federal piece of legislation that
maybe regulation would be technically more accurate, but I'm not sure.
Regulation might be a better word.
Yeah.
But it's a federal piece of regulation. All schools, education system, schools, anywhere, receiving federal money, must pretty much ensure the equality of all students regardless of sex. So, like, that includes, public K through 12 schools, universities, Ohio University, basically all ensuring that nobody faces any discrimination that would hinder their education on the basis of sex. So those are the two pieces of legislation or regulation that pretty much go into this process. So it's since it's such a long and complicated process, I've always thought it best to break it up into 4 parts, because that's how my mind works, is it helps me to break things up. So there's the pre-investigation, the investigation, a hearing, and then a post-hearing. And then also, for clarity's sake, while I'm talking about this, I'm going to be using the language that is used in Title IX and used in the process. So I'm just going to clarify that really quick. A complainant is somebody who is bringing forth a formal complaint. So that is typically somebody who has had some type of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct portrayed against them, and they're bringing a claim that something has happened. A respondent is the person who that claim is against. And an advisor, and this is going to become more prevalent, it's going to be more pertinent when we're talking about the hearing, but the advisor is somebody who assists their party, whether they are a complainant or a respondent, with helping to prepare materials for a hearing, drafting questions, and then they confer with the party during meetings. So it's kind of like an attorney, even though it doesn't have to be an attorney, it can be anybody, but that's kind of some basic terminology. So
do you have anything you want to add, Maddie, before we get into the pre-investigation?
Yeah. Just to clarify, what an advisor is. Could an advisor be like another student? It could be literally anyone.
It can be literally anyone.
Wow.
I have right in front of me. This is it's a document that you can find on the ECRC website, and the ECRC is the University
Equity Civil Rights Compliance Office.
Correct. They're the people who, basically take on all civil rights or Title IX claims, and they're the people who investigate and, have like the trials and stuff like that. That's what they handled. The Title IX office is located within there. But they have a document that goes through the process. It is 40 pages, and it is called the Sexual Harassment and Other Sexual Misconduct Grievance Process. And in it, it has a definition of an advisor. It is 2 paragraphs, and it is by them. The job of an advisor is the definition of an advisor, according to this document, is the advisor may assist the party by helping to prepare materials, draft questions, and confer with the party during meetings and hearings, as long as this does not unreasonably disrupt or delay the process. The advisor also represents the party by asking questions on the other party and witnesses at the meeting. However, the advisor may not take statements on behalf of the party. The advisor may The advisor may be anyone of the student's choosing, including an attorney. If a party does not have an advisor to question the other party and with witness at the hearing, one will be appointed to do so by the institution, and the institution is Ohio University. So it's like an attorney.
Sorry. Okay, gotcha.
But it's not technically an attorney because this is not technically a legal case.
It's not technically a legal case, but
Yeah.
the way that it's set up, and this isn't Ohio University, coming up with this idea. This is federal. This is all college campuses that receive federal money, all public universities, high schools, all that stuff. But the way that this process is set up really mimics a trial, like a full-on trial. And I think that, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I remember when these changes were first brought up, Betsy DeVos, the then Secretary of Education, would, say that this process was, changed in order to protect the
Due process.
Yep. To protect due process and, all that stuff. So that's kind of why I think that that's a little bit editorial, but that's kind of why I think that it mimics a trial a little bit. It's because it's trying to protect due process.
It is essentially designed to mimic a trial process without actually being a legal case.
Yes. All right. So let's get into it. So the process begins, for breaking up the process, it begins with pre-investigation. Everything begins with a complaint made by someone to the ECRC. It can be anybody. Here, the person who's experienced something. It could be a close friend, anybody, someone on the street, a stranger saying, hey, I heard this person, talk about this. But if you are a mandatory reporter, and all Ohio University employees are, they have a requirement to report instances of sexual misconduct. So that includes, faculty, staff, student employees, everybody. There's a group of people who are not mandatory reporters. That is like, counselors, people working with, what is it called? Survivors advocacy.
Yeah, SAP, Survivor Advocacy Program.
Yeah, people working with SAP, counselors. The Title IX coordinator can set certain events to not, meet that kind of like mandatory reporter, distinction. But because the complaint is made to the ECRC, that's not really the formal start of the process. But once somebody makes a complaint to the ECRC, it is followed by a meeting where the ECRC will offer support services, discuss different options, and explain the process. But the most important thing to know about this kind of part is whether or not this person wants to file a formal complaint. The formal complaint is the beginning, the true beginning, the formal beginning of this process. So if the person decides that they do not want to file a formal complaint, the support services will continue. But the Title IX coordinator can determine to file and sign a complaint, but that is pretty rare because it's hard to make a case when you don't have a complainant. But if a complainant wants to file a formal complaint, they can do so, and then the process continues. But it's important that the Title IX coordinator needs to sign the complaint in order for it to really kind of start.
So
let's say we go forward with the complaint? What happens?
So if actually first, if no, like if there's no formal complaint, the person who the victim, I guess, would still continue to receive support, like the support they get from ECRC.
Yep.
But there would be no moving forward from that point. It would be essentially over as far as the university is concerned.
It's completely over. They would receive supportive measures, that's campus counseling, a no contact order has been pretty popular. I remember Carrie Griffin telling me that in an interview.
Okay.
Changing campus housing, work schedules, academic support. And that's just kind of like some of the options that are available. There can be more. Anything, can probably be a support system if they think it would be a support measure, if they think it could help. But, they would still receive those measures if they decide to not file a formal complaint. It wouldn't move forward. There would be no process. It ends there.
And then, so this complainant, if they decide to, no, I do not want to file a formal complaint, the Title IX coordinator can still just file one and go right ahead with it?
Yeah, if they think that there's I think that...
So is there really a choice?
I mean, I just don't think the victim would be involved. The complainant would not be involved anymore. That's why it would be so difficult to make a case if the Title IX coordinator were to sign a formal complaint and not have somebody else there, if that makes sense. So I remember Carrie Griffin also saying that it's pretty rare for that to happen.
We already mentioned that Carrie Griffin is the Title IX coordinator.
Have we?
I can't remember. But just in case we haven't.
Carrie Griffin is the Title IX coordinator at Ohio University. She, I interviewed her probably about a year ago for my first story. And, a lot of the information that we're going to be talking about today comes from that story that I originally wrote. And it's going to be coming from my interview with her.
So let's say that a formal complaint is filed. What happens next?
So what happens next is a notice of investigation is sent to the person who the complaint is against. So that would be in this terms, it would be the respondent. They're the ones responding to the complaint.
Okay.
Just so they know that there is an investigation on them. It's a notice of investigation. After the notice of investigation has been sent to the respondent, you kind of go into an investigation phase. But before that, it is important to know that the Title IX office can determine whether or not a case can be dismissed under Title IX throughout any point of the investigation. So what does that mean? Because of the recent changes to Title IX, what counts as a Title IX violation is very narrow. So certain things that maybe should be a Title IX violation or does hinder the education, it does count as that should be a Title IX violation don't necessarily count as a Title IX violation. Some things that count as a Title IX violation don't necessarily count as a Title IX violation. So that doesn't mean necessarily that the process is over. People, if somebody commits an act of sexual misconduct and it doesn't count under Title IX, they can still be brought through the process under university policy. So that's an important distinction to mention. Let me go through my notes really quick. So according to some documents on the ECRC website, a complaint can be dismissed under Title IX if the offense was not sexual harassment, if it did not happen in or during an educational program or activity where Ohio University has control, if Ohio University does not have substantial control over the respondent, if the offense did not occur in the United States or the complainant is not participating in or attempting to participate in the education program or activity of Ohio University. So that kind of closes out the pre-investigation, and then we go straight into the investigation part of it.
So when the definition, or when Title IX was updated a few years ago, they changed the definition of sexual harassment to be much more specific, because it used to be just unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature. And now it's considered unwelcome conduct that a reasonable person would determine is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the school's education program or activity. So that, to my understanding, would be one of the determining factors of if something is considered a Title IX violation or not.
Definitely, yeah.
As well as the fact that it has to occur during an on-campus activity or a class or something like that.
And Ohio University has to have, quote unquote, substantial control over the respondent.
Yes.
But if you file a formal complaint and it is dismissed under Title IX, you can still repeal the decision, and the request to review must be sent to the Title IX coordinator within 3 days, and then the other party has 3 days to submit a rebuttal for that. So now let's go on to investigation, which is actually kind of a shorter part of it, but I'm sure it takes a while. So when there's an investigation happening, 2 investigators are assigned and they collect evidence, conduct interviews, try to figure out what happened. All to be put together into what is called an investigative report. The investigative report is handed to the complainant and the respondent prior to a hearing. It's a draft of it. So what they can do, they can edit things, add things on, all that stuff. And they have it for 10 days. Then they hand it back, and then it is finalized, and then it is given back along with, and then the finalized version of the investigative report is handed back to the respondent and the
complainant. Both parties.
Both parties, thank you. To both parties for 10 days minimum. And then we get right into the hearing.
So before we get into the hearing, I just want to note that that's a minimum of 20 days between just those 2 steps.
Right.
Because the investigation before the report is finalized is 10 days, and then after the report is finalized, it's another 10 days.
Yep.
But anyway, you can continue into the hearing now.
Minimum of 20 days.
Yes.
Yeah. The thing that I really note about this is that it's all very kind of controlled. There's a specific amount of days, minimum days between each step for a lot of it. And you're going to see that really a lot when we get to the hearing. So, no less than 10 days before a hearing, a notice of hearing is sent to both parties, and then pre-hearing meetings are held at least 5 days before the hearing. So the hearing is heard by a hearing panel. It consists of 3 panelists, a designated hearing chair, and then 2 others. All the people present at the hearing there's going to be the panelists, of course, investigators, all people who are involved, witnesses, the advisors to the complainant and the respondent. And we can go over the hearing, what kind of happens in a hearing really quick. Let me go pull that up.
Okay.
So here is the order of hearing. This is how the hearing is supposed to be conducted according to documents on the ECRC website. So the hearing chair begins the hearing by discussing expectations for the hearing. He or she will give a brief overview of the allegations and may ask investigators questions about anything that happened during the investigation. The complainant will be able to respond to the investigative report, and the hearing panel can then ask complainant questions. Then the hearing panel will question the complainant, and the respondent's advisor can question the complainant as well. Then, after that, the same thing happens for the respondent. They will be able to respond to the investigative report. The hearing panel can ask the respondent questions, and then the hearing panel questions the respondent, and then the complainant's advisor can also question the respondent. Then the hearing panel can call witnesses, ask the witnesses questions, and then both of the advisors will be able to question the witnesses as well. Finally, both the respondent and the complainant will be able to make summary statements near the end of the hearing. So after that, all evidence is presented. The hearing panel kind of deliberates. They're kind of like a jury, and then they make their decision on a majority vote. There's 3 of them, so 2 out of 3, 2 to 1, 3-0, whatever. After they make a decision, the hearing panel, they provide a statement of finding to the Title IX coordinator. So that kind of closes out the hearing section of the process. Now the hearing's over. The statement of finding has been sent to the Title IX coordinator. So after the hearing, the Title IX coordinator and the hearing chair prepare a notice of outcome. So it's going to be a whole bunch of different things in like one document. It's, final determination, just basically a summary of what had happened, what policies were violated, what steps were taken by Ohio University. This has to be submitted 4 days after the statement of finding is received.
Within 4 days or like after 4 days?
So it must be sent within 4 days of the statement of finding being received. The notice of outcome also contains information about potential sanctions. So what a sanction is, it's basically like the school disciplining the respondent. That's if the panel finds the respondent guilty or that found that they had violated university policy or Title IX. So let me read this really quick. Sorry. So there are different sanctions for university students and university organizations versus university staff. So sanctions taken against students or student groups can include reprimand, disciplinary probation, disciplinary suspension, and disciplinary expulsion. Sanctions that can be taken against employees include censure, reprimand, suspension without pay, and demotion and / or loss of tenure. So that's basically being fired.
Yeah.
So that is in this notice of income. Finally, the respondent and the complainant can appeal the notice of outcome. So if the appeal is granted, they get a new hearing, there's a new sanction, or the case will be remanded. If there is not an appeal or if the appeal is not granted, the findings of the process are final along with any sanctions laid out in the notice of outcome.
All right. I think that about covers it. Do you have anything else you want to add?
This is like a very rough kind of summary of what happens. This isn't everything in the utmost detail. This is very much like a skimming of a very long, very complicated, and a very time-consuming process. So, not everything in the utmost detail is covered here. So just, always, if there's any questions, any concerns, definitely check out the ECRC website. Check out our reporting, my reporting, Bo's reporting is great. Check out Maddie's project. It's also great, for more information or any questions or concerns.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Athens Happens. Make sure to check out thenewpolitical.com for podcast episodes and other content. Thank you, and until next time.